Spoiler warning for episodes 1 to 4 of Kemono Jihen all throughout this video. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello everybody, my name's Link, here to talk about my first impressions on the winter 2021 anime. When a series of animal bodies that rot away after a single night begin appearing in a remote mountain village, Inagami, a detective from Tokyo who specializes in the occult, is called to investigate. While working the case, he befriends a strange boy who works in the field every day instead of going to school. Shunned by his peers and nicknamed Dorotabo after a yokai that lives in the mud, he helps Inagami uncover the truth behind the killings. But supernatural forces are at work, and while Dorotabo is just a nickname, it might not be the only thing about the boy that isn't human. Kemono Jihen really went for my balls when I first laid my eyes on that beautiful first episode. This might seem like a bit of a tangent, but hang with me, okay? I promise this is related to the video. So, I love Percy Jackson and the Olympians book series. I've had a deep fascination for all things mythical and supernatural since I was young. I can't really remember when I grew this interest, and I wouldn't even doubt if I came out of the womb with the attraction of all things otherworldly. And I will admit to an extent, just at the back of my mind, that even to this day, I still believe that these mystical beings, the likes of gods and yokai, actually exist. We just outgrew the need to fear them now. And okay, I'm really embarrassed to say that because I feel like I just told everyone I still believed in Santa. But with that mindset comes the curious question of how these supernatural beings adjust to living in the modern world. Aside from the grim answer that they, died. So the first time I saw the magical world of Percy Jackson, with Hermes the messenger god running a delivery company, and Medusa running a statue store or whatever that is, I felt genuine excitement for this rich world of wonders. And it wormed its way into my heart into being one of my favorite tropes ever. Okay, to be 100% honest, the story that actually got me into this specific genre is a comic series called Trece. It's a Filipino comic that imagines how old folklore creatures live in a modern Manila. And it's really cool. And it's in English, so read it if you can. And it's supposed to get a Netflix series in 2021, so I'll definitely make a video when it comes out. I just thought to use Percy Jackson because it's a more common example to use based on my viewership. Okay, enough. Sorry, I'll talk about the anime now. I hope you didn't leave. So, as you might have guessed with that convoluted intro, Kemono Jihen really went out of the gates clutching my heart by having that very premise down to a T. From having a seductress cat kimono working in a red light district to prey on thirsty men, to a kitsune working in a police station, as well as throwing in the curveball that not every kimono is willing to play nice with humans. Whether the actions are just a reflection of how the humans have trespassed into their land or pure malicious intent is a coin toss. The art and direction of episode 1 welcomes you right into the strange world of Kemono Jihen with its almost stilted portrayal of its undeniably beautiful world. It opens with the sun blaring down onto the earth so harshly that it washed near everything out. Also giving you a visual to gauge the heat our protagonist Dorotabo is working under. A hint to just how he's treated by the people who took him in, if it wasn't already obvious by how the other children ostracized him. Accompanied by little more than the ambience of animals in the background, the opening scene alone serves to make you feel unsettled. That something just below the surface is wrong. But before you can even put a name to the feeling, the show returns to a more normal lit and lush world as if nothing was ever out of place. From there, we're taken through this slow ride as we're made to soak in the scenery and situation given to us through Inagami. I absolutely adore these moments as they show and don't tell us just how Inagami slowly affects Dorotabo's world, whether intentional or not. And despite using a montage to show the things they've been up to until the designated time for them to strike, it still feels properly paced for each bonding experience led to them learning something about each other and how they are as a person. Giving the show don't tell tactics some teeth is amazing character animation. To show Dorotabo's noticeably expressionless face, and yet they manage to express genuine anguish as he forces himself into a tight ball like any child would, and as he harshly gasps for breath out of fear. They've masterly perfected the endearing art of showing a child who has a hard time expressing himself, but can still feel these things. And because this is shonen, the action scenes introduced were high-paced and energetic. Choreography pulling off some surprise moves that gives you an extra shot of adrenaline in its tight and bombastic face-off against a creature larger than them as any good shonen fight would. From the get-go, it really did seem like this anime was sent down by the anime gods for me, as it beautifully delivered us to a world full of wonders that live just outside of our peripheral, while simultaneously keeping us excited to how these smaller creatures will triumph over a menacing threat with a hearty serving of emotional moments to get you attached and invested in the characters. And with who I assume were the beings that blurred the lines between the normal and the supernatural, I was excited to get to know everybody and how they'll orbit around our main protagonist. When I pitched the anime to a friend, I told her that Torotabo was like a more watered-down version of Violet from Violet Evergarden. Just a lot less war, but still somewhat in the same predicament that they've lacked the feeling of love all their lives, and now that they've met people who actually care about their well-being, they don't know how to react but want to protect them all the same. And much like how Violet Evergarden destroyed our hearts with that, the first episode gave me hope that maybe Kemono Jihen can reach the same emotional highs and lows that came with finally learning how to be human, like how our favorite auto memoir doll did. But instead of removing him from the violence like they did with Violet, they kinda almost brought him closer to it. Like, I doubt Torotabo was biting anyone's jugular before he went under Inugami. Right? Also, they're supposedly the same age? Speaking of Inugami, at the moment, I do see him more as an elder mentor type, serving as both our handy kimono hand guide as he expositions all and every kind of creature they'll encounter with pinpoint accuracy, while also already having a plan on how to deal with them. Oftentimes, in an exercise for his underage employees to learn the ropes, you child laborer, leaving them to deal with it. He clearly cares deeply for these kids, and maybe due to being an adult, he knows that their lives are just so much harder, and they'll surely skirt the lines of danger just because of what their lineages are. So far, his role is mostly used as a plot device and a character pivot for the other kids. But I'd be interested in seeing him having his own agenda and motives. There are already little hints thrown about, like how the bar at the front was a remnant of his past with his partner, so clearly there's something about him to be explored. Shiki I actually found plenty endearing. A lot of people might have thought he was a brat for pushing Dorotabo away, and even pulling some not so nice tricks on him at first glance. But as someone who's been on a similar situation of being introduced to someone who you thought was going to replace you, his reactions are very realistic, especially for a 14-year-old. And that's another thing I want to praise Kemono Jihen for. They actually managed to make a 14-year-old look like a child. We live in a world where teens are drawn with six-packs and muscles that can break me in half. And of course I know that it has its reasons for the story. It will make sense if a high schooler who's always training and fighting builds up muscle. And sometimes it's just for the tone of the anime. If you're showing a serious and gritty show, some impactful scenes might be undermined if your character looks soft and unequipped for the dangers. Of course there's a question on why we have teens in these situations in the first place. And the simple answer is that shonen is the most sellable genre in anime. And as it tries to appeal to a certain demographic, they'll tend to cater to them more in giving fantastical tales and hero stories for them to relate to. And I really hate myself for giving myself so much more work to edit, so back to Shiki! Thanks to the character designs, his little tantrums don't really feel annoying because it looks like what it is, a moody 14-year-old having a tantrum. And we see under his sharp eyes and angry face that he's someone who generally cares for those he calls his friends. Though the one thing I still haven't gotten used to is that he's voiced by Hanaya Natsuki. He looks like Bakugo, so when he screams I expect to hear but instead I get and then comes Akira. And in his arc, the issues became apparent. I was actually really excited to know more about Akira. because it was clear in the opening that he was from Yuki Onna descent, and to me, that seems like a super OP skill. Add to that, I'm actually really glad that Inagami seems to support Akira's interest. I'm tired of the idea that a guy liking a traditionally feminine, cute thing and having a sweet tooth implies that he's anything but a boy, or whatever he claims to be. And I really appreciate that he's very aware of who he is and what he likes. But while Dorotabo and Shiki's episodes were handled with careful precision and also helped in expanding their personalities and the world around them in a tasteful way, Akira's felt too forced. I understand that they're basically using the same formula they did with Shiki's episode, which is setting up the first half of the runtime with a concept that inches Dorotabo closer to being more human, while the latter half showcases just what his abilities are. The only problem is that while the first two examples featured one continuous storyline, they featured two unrelated instances to frame Akira's story episode. The first half gave us a hint that Akira feels useless in comparison to his two other companions, because he isn't as fearless or as confident in his powers. Something that's been abundantly clear during the past episodes. And then he's just completely absent throughout the first half, while the remaining half became the sole Akira-centered parts. Not to sound contradictory to myself, as I did get my half deserving of world building by being shown just how more sentient Kemonos get by, but I feel like the world building came in expense of the character development instead of with it. And by all accounts, it should have worked, because by episode 4, since they used episode 3 to introduce that bitch,
私の残りが嗅いでいいよ。さあどうぞ座って。残念。カフェでリフレッシュしよう。それじゃよく見えない。もっと近くで見せて。すごい。素敵。目消せて超レアな感じ。超レアなアイテムなんだよ。いいな。
Akira's character was already established unlike the others, and good storytelling can still deliver hard-hitting beats in the remaining 10 minutes that it has. And I had all the reasons to believe it can pull it off based on its older episodes. So, how did they deliver Akira's backstory? It just says it, near unprompted. Okay? Well then, how did he overcome his shortcomings to use his power for others? He just got emotional and burst it all out in one go. Okay, so maybe it was unfair of me to expect that Akira will have some sort of finesse with his powers like Shiki presented. And to the show's credit, Akira activating his powers were very on brand with how they realistically portray children, as it all burst out in the height of emotions and fear and desperation. But the exposition of his past? Much like Skate the Infinity, I really wanted to cover the show the first episode it was out. But, unlike Skate, didn't quite carry all of its strong points from the first episode. I've praised the show's first episodes for its masterful pacing and application of the show don't tell technique. How, even if they spent 5 days together shown in only a few seconds of mundane tasks, yet you can clearly see how they grew closer to each other. It was an exercise of gentleness and thematic mastery as they conveyed what would have been critical character foundation and displayed its full gravity without so much of a peep. And it disappointed me when we see that payoff in episode 2 with Dorotabo just sitting down and spilling his guts to sometimes even dark void backgrounds. But I convinced myself there that it's just how to portray his general confusion of feelings. He can barely find the words to explain what his feelings, so it's giving us like an almost view into his headspace as he traverses through the unfamiliar emotions. But if anything, the scene in episode 4 where he gives Inugami the tissues as he adorably comes to the confusion that that's how he can portray his affections to those important to him is more amusing and effective of portraying childlike innocence. So they have great ways of showing it, but Akira's exposition of his backstory, motivation, and goal, and yes, it's all in there, just feels rushed and clumsy, especially considering how it was preceded by an honestly subpar plot, and the mission that frames Dorotawa's quest to find out what love is feels inconsequential, especially with how underwhelming it ended. It just felt like a whole lot of time wasted instead of setting the stage for Akira himself. Like they could have cut off some parts there to give off even a minute hint of Akira and his complex he's developed because of what his brother told him. At least then, there would have been some sort of organic setup for Akira to mention his past, and not just because they need to tell it because the other two already got their time to shine. Now usually, these issues don't deserve that much criticism. Other anime have done it and I didn't subject it to scrutiny like this. But can I really be blamed when it had been evident that this series is capable of greatness, and even when it stumbles, there are these golden moments in the middle that allude that they haven't truly lost touch of their spark. Kemono Jihen is a textbook definition of hit or miss. It's just really sad because even if you take out my earlier bias for its premise, it just has all the elements of a lovable and heart-rending story presenting a long but rewarding character journey to see a kind and mistreated boy belong to a family, even if it's not by blood. I'm rooting for this anime to get its firm footing on the ground. I so desperately want this to be the best it can be as it's shown with its more brilliant moments, and not have to hope that they handle the story bit with tact, and not have another someone narrates their entire life situation when clearly body language and some experimental camera work can convey much of their emotions already. I guess the only other thing that I have to say about this anime is that I was kind of bummed when they moved to the city after episode 1. This is just purely personal preference. I might be partial to the cottage girl vibe. People will shit on countrysides because there's nothing to do and internet is shit, and I agree. But also the way it's so quiet and the greenery around you form like a giant comforting cradle does wonders for my depression. I mean, yeah, I know it's a strategic move to organically add various kinds of situations, but I just love plants, okay? Oh god, kill me, this is already so long, I'm gonna suffer editing this. As I said at the beginning of the video, I love the premise. I could spend just dozens of episodes exploring the world and finding out how the Kemonos live in modern society. Either how they thrive with their abilities or tragically stagnate. Though, as annoyed as I was with Inari, I'm also curious how she'll play as an obstacle because she and Inugami are kind of forced into this begrudging truce as they try to coexist with humans. And I have my issues with Inugami just sending the kids there knowing Inner's intent, but this video is already too long. Clearly, she'll stop at nothing to get that life stone that Dorotabo has. That I will not get into for spoiler reasons. And also, this hot vampire dude that looks like he could be Kuzuha's older brother, he already gives up the impression that he's this super old dude that's into technology, and I'm really hoping that he's an ally. I just really want to see the show succeed. It has every tool to make it a classic if only it knows how to use it well. And that's it for this one, everybody! Drop a comment down below on what you think of the anime or if this video convinced you to check it out. While usually I'll end it here, but to anyone who does actually watch my videos, they might have noticed this one's extremely late. And that's because my computer's in a pretty bad shape. A few years ago, my motherboard from 2012 managed to leak acid from its little nub things down to my graphics card, and as you might have guessed, that broke it. So both my monitors have been plugged into the motherboard for near 2 years now. And while it's been manageable since then, video editing isn't as kind and I get crashes and blue screens more and more. So yes, I'm looking to update some of my stuff and I opened commissions for it. Please check it out if you can. I offer bust and half body illustrations, fully colored. The link to my commission details are in the description. And even if you can't commission, a retweet would be a ton of help as well. And if you want to help, my tip jar coffee is also in the description. Okay, let's finally wrap this up. Thank you so much if you stayed for this long. Check out this playlist for my other series where I review and recommend anime you might not have heard of. Are they hidden gems or do they deserve to fall into obscurity? Let's find out together. And as always, don't forget to leave a thumbs up if you liked the video and consider subscribing for all things weeb and anime. Bye bye!